friends, and welcome back to Frank and Friends. Today we will be doing a science experiment, and we're going to be talking about the difference between floating and sinking. How many of us know what floating means? Yeah, it's when an object sits on top of the water, comes up above the water. How many of us know what sinking means? Yeah, it's when an object falls below the water. So floating is when something is on top of the water, and sinking is when something is falling below the water, underneath the water. So I'm going to pull out my little water bottle here, and I'm going to show you that I didn't fill it all the way to the top because I wanted to show you that there is this little thing called an air bubble. Now, what an air bubble does is it helps things float. It floats to the top of the water. And when you rotate or flip this water bottle, you will see that the air bubble moves to the top of the water. So if we keep going, now it keeps moving. Do you see how that keeps moving? Yeah, it keeps going. And so that helps us determine whether or not something might sink or float. If something has air in it, it will probably float. But if something doesn't have air, then it probably will sink, right? So we're going to do a little experiment, and I have 5 objects. I have a fork. I have a maraca. I have a orange ball. I have a coin. This is a quarter. And then I also have my handy dandy water bottle. And we're going to put each thing inside my bucket here. And we're going to see if you can tell me whether or not it floats or it will sink. So let's start off with our little orange basketball here. Do we think this will float? Or do you think that this will sink? Well, let's find out. It floats! Now, this floats because inside this ball, we see that it's squishy, so that means there's probably air inside there. And when we put the ball on top of the water, the air keeps the ball up above the water, so it floats. Isn't that cool? How about a fork? Do we think a fork will sink, or do we think it'll float? Well, let's find out. Oh, it sinks. It sinks to the bottom because there's no air inside of a fork. It's hard, or what some people might say is dense. And it will, because there's no air that can be trapped inside the fork, then it will sink. So let's keep that over here. How about our maraca? So do we think our maraca will sink, or do we think it'll float? Well, let's find out. It floats! It floats! Yeah, our maraca has air in it. We hear those beads rumbling around, and there's air trapped inside of this green little ball. And so when you put it on top of the water, it keeps it up above the water, or making it float. How about a quarter? Do we think a quarter will sink, or do we think it will float? Well, let's find out. It sinks. Our quarter sinks to the bottom. And that's because, like the fork, you can't put water inside of a quarter. It can't be trapped, so it falls to the bottom. Very good. All right, this one's going to be a little tricky. Do we think our water bottle will float or sink? Let's find out. It kind of does both, doesn't it? We see that where the water is inside the water bottle, that is the part sinking. But when the air bubble inside the water bottle is to the top. That's the part that stays above the water. How about if we dump all the water out and we put this, an empty water bottle, on top of the water? What do we think will happen now? Well, let's find out. It floats! And that's because all of the air is in the water bottle now, so it helps stay on top of the water. It floats on top of the water. Now, my friends, I want you to go and find, when you're home, I want you to find 5 objects that you can play with. You can do this in a bucket like I have. You can do it in your bathtub. You could do it in a sink. And I want you to see if you can find 5 objects that you can get to sink or to float. And if you want to add a little bit of extra fun, you can put some soaps in too and have a really fun time. But that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining me at Frank and Friends with our science experiment, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys!